it really is my honor and pleasure to be here today. It's wonderful to see so many people turn out to learn about the latest from Fido Alliance and Fido Authentication and our members here in Korea. As you saw, we have a fantastic agenda with experts in Fido Authentication and lots of different perspectives as well. So it's not just a long lesson on Fido, it's also about how people are applying this technology to address various use cases. So it is wonderful to be here in Seoul. We've made a lot of progress. This is not the right slides. We've made a lot of progress since we were here last in 2019. I have to say that Seoul is one of my favorite cities. I love coming here. I love the people, the food. I saw some snow today. I live in Los Angeles. That's a very exciting thing for me. But perhaps most importantly, Seoul and Korea at large is a hub of innovation. There's a rich history of innovation in telecommunications, ICT, and most recently around Fido. So it's good to be here. It's good to see people in person after everything we've all been through over the past couple of years with COVID and such. So let's talk a little bit about what is Fido, just to recap to make sure we're on the same page. Fido Alliance is an industry body with a single mission, which is to develop authentication standards, certification and market adoption programs to reduce the world's over-reliance on passwords. So Fido Alliance as a body is coming up on our 10th year of existence. And this is what we've been doing all along, and I'll talk more about how we operate as a body and how this all kind of ties together as we think about delivering core specifications and then new technologies and new implementation types to allow you to be successful in protecting your resources, whether that's your consumers or perhaps your customers or your employees. Who is Fido Alliance? This is our board of directors. Right? We have over 40 companies on the board, including here from Korea. We have Ryan Secure, Samsung, and TrustKey. We thank them for their leadership. But I think what's wonderful about this set of logos is that it's really everyone who we want to have sitting around the table trying to solve this problem, sitting around the table doing exactly that. So we have companies that are creating devices and platforms at massive scale. So not just Samsung, but also Apple and Google and Microsoft and the chips that underpin them. So companies like Intel and Qualcomm. Secondly, we have a lot of companies who are experts in security, identity, and biometrics. And last but not least, we have the service providers whose businesses absolutely require Fido and Fido authentication to become a success. So those are the payment networks, the banks, companies like Amazon and Meta, whose businesses are utterly dependent on the need to reduce fraud and have better user authentication. In addition to those board companies, we have hundreds of other members who are sponsor members. Those are the ones that typically comprise the Fido working groups, associate members who build out the Fido certified ecosystem, and then we liaise with like-minded .orgs and independent organizations, and we have government members as well, who bring in government-related use cases for delivering Fido, using Fido to deliver e-citizen and government agency services. And Fido's goal from day one, I told you who we are, but our goal from day one has been to transform the market from being dependent on centrally stored and shared secrets to a model that's a little bit more decentralized in nature, that provides better user authentication that's both simpler and stronger than the incumbent technologies. The incumbent technologies being passwords and OTPs. And that's the sweet spot that we've always sought to find. Right? Simpler, stronger user authentication. We have a standardized way of doing it, so it's basically a standards-based asymmetric public key cryptography with a single gesture that a user has to take to actually log in. And Fido was not the first organization to invent public key cryptography, but it's user friendliness, which is so important. Right? There's a long history of very secure but very unusable technologies that are not being leveraged today. Simply put, if the technology is too hard to use, your consumers will not opt in. Likewise, if the technology is too hard to use, your employees will find a way to work around it and it just won't get used. So it's a combination of ease of use and strength of security which is critical to having a solution that will be adopted at scale. So let's talk a little bit about how Fido works as an organization. We really do three things as a body. First of all, we build technology, right? We build technical specifications based on real-world use cases, right? So if a business has a challenge, such as trying to reduce fraud, we can build specifications against that, right? So the authentication specifications. And then beyond that, in addition to our specifications, we are very keen to establish an ecosystem. And this is where the Fido Certified program comes into play. Right? I like to say that specifications without certification is like one hand clapping. You really need to understand that a product doesn't just meet the protocol, but also can interoperate with other products. And that's what unleashes the power of open standards. So it's the ecosystem of Fido certified products, which is so important. And fortunately, here in Korea, you'll hear from TTA later, but TTA is a Fido certified lab and has done so much to help boost Fido's presence in Korea, but also globally by certifying so many products. Then the third thing we do is facilitate adoption. So programs like this, right? We invest in marketing, but not only that, we have different working groups where members collaborate to address regional use cases, like the Fido Korea working group. Or we have domain-specific working groups looking at consumer implementations, or enterprise, or government. And it's through this work that we do as a community that educates everybody who wants to be educated. And everybody kind of moves forward with their own Fido implementations, becomes more savvy to it, more successful with how they deploy Fido. And then once that's actually out in market, we learn from that and iterate, right? So this is a cycle that's a self-perpetuating cycle. So based on what we learn from the initial implementations, that gets fed back into the technology that's being built, that's fed back into Fido certified products, we see more adoption, and this is the loop that we as a body take, we as a broader community take, in order to enhance and continually improve Fido's outputs. So let's break that down, those three steps I talked about, and look at what we've done most recently in 2022. So the first thing we talked about was building technology, and it goes without saying that I think the headline thing from Fido Alliance this year, as far as building goes, was passkeys. Right? Who's heard of passkey? Have we heard of this concept? So this was announced in May with a lot of fanfare, and it's not a net new technology per se, but it really is a new way to implement WebAuthn that allows the private key to be securely synced across an operating system cloud. So I'll talk a little bit more about passkey coming up here. So actually, what is passkey? The literal definition that Fido works with. Passkeys are a password replacement that provide faster, easier, and more secure sign-ins to websites and apps across the user's devices. As announced by Fido Alliance in March, with support from Apple, Google, and Microsoft in May, passkeys address some of the usability and deployability challenges that have held back widespread Fido adoption by allowing the private key to be securely synced across the cloud, which thereby allows consumers to have a pretty intuitive user experience, where if you're enrolled with a service on one device, and then you go to access that service on the next device, you don't need to re-enroll. You simply use your device biometrics to have automatic access. And the other benefit that brings is that to the service provider, who historically has had to rely upon a password to allow for the user to re-enroll themselves, or to enroll a new device, no longer are they so dependent on using that password for account recovery or for device re-enrollment. So it solves both a usability challenge, but also a major security challenge, and is very much in line with Fido Alliance's objectives of reducing reliance on passwords. So this was announced back in May, and since then we've seen both Apple and Google go live with their support. And they both, so it's now live in iOS and macOS Ventura. It's in beta on Android. Microsoft will be supporting passkeys in Windows in 2023. Another thing that's important to note, though, is that Fido Alliance has embraced the term passkey to mean any passwordless Fido sign-in. Because one thing we realized, one thing we've gotten feedback on, is that it's confusing to consumers when there's no term for Fido. Our consumers don't know what FIDO is, or they shouldn't know what FIDO is. So now we have a term called passkey, which will stand for a synced passkey, like what we're talking about here, but also your UAF app or even a passwordless login on a FIDO security key. So passkey is a terminology that we as an organization, we as a body will standardize on, so it becomes very clear to consumers they have a choice between passwords or passkeys, with passkeys being the preferred approach over time. So we announced this back in May, then at our annual Authenticate conference back in October, we had two major companies announce their intent to support passkey and deploy passkey. One is PayPal, the other is NTT Docomo. And what's significant about these two companies is that they're two of the earliest founding companies of Fido Alliance. And they've pushed Fido in every iteration of the protocol, and now they're ready to move forward with passkey as well to drive further innovation within their communities. I anticipate and I'm aware of many other brands that are now supporting passkey, and we'll see more and more announcements about this over the next several months and next couple of years. For all of you and for the industry at large, we've released several resources for passkey. So that QR code takes you to a landing page that has a FIDO logo, some FAQs. We'll continue to update this information to keep everyone who's interested in understanding how to use passkey up to speed and well equipped to do exactly that. So that's our build story for 2022. Let's talk about ecosystem, the next step. Two major certification pieces. One is FIDO Certified Professional Program. So this was a program we introduced earlier this year that allows people like yourselves who are FIDO experts to take a test and be certified as a FIDO Certified Professional. So this is a program we're running in conjunction with Pearson, the International Testing Center, where you can actually go in, take the test, and if you pass the test, you will then get a FIDO Certified Professional badge like that logo you see here. So we're still improving this program and still iterating on the program, but it is live, and it was a major milestone for us as part of our goal is to build an ecosystem not just of products, but also of capable engineers and architects and product leads who can implement FIDO successfully. The other major ecosystem milestone we had this year was the release of our document authenticity certification program. And again, also tied to TTA, we were very excited yesterday to announce that TTA is now a FIDO certified lab enabling testing for the DocAuth program. So we look forward to seeing a lot of progress coming out of the lab here in Korea. And then adoption is our last kind of point in our virtuous circle. We've done a lot on adoption this year. A couple of very tangible things. If you are an enterprise seeking to deploy FIDO, we've released a new resource called Enterprise Journey Map. It's on our website. It gives you step-by-step tips on how to prepare your enterprise for successful FIDO deployment. And the other two things are tied to usability. Right? Usability is a common theme. In fact, it's probably the most talked about thing inside of FIDO, and every conversation I have with a company considering deploying FIDO begins and ends with usability. Simply put, as we talked about before, the technology needs to be usable for it to be leveraged. And so we've done two important things this year. Well, first one was UX guidelines. So we released our second set of UX guidelines, user experience guidelines. This was for a security key use case. It's an optimal way to do that. But more importantly is actually we have a UX foundation now in the organization that will allow us to continue to put usability at the center of everything FIDO Alliance releases. And that's done through a UX committee we've launched. This is incredibly unique for a standards organization to have a body of around 20 to 30 professionals who are not technologists or not engineers. These are actual designers and UX experts. And so what they do is they meet and look at our specifications, they look at our outputs, and they actually are going to help drive future iterations of our UX guidelines in line with a FIDO design system they've created to make sure that, again, usability is front and center for everything that FIDO does. And so all of these things, are part of what FIDO does, and this is, I think, one thing that's helped us be successful is that we've had this consistent focus on our mission, which is to reduce reliance on passwords, ditching passwords in favor of passkeys. And that will continue to be our focus, right? Focus on reducing reliance on passwords. And so, as I start to wrap up, I think it's helpful to look back on where we came from. Right, we're coming up on our 10th anniversary. In fact, 2023 will be our 10th year as a public body. And so it's come by quite quickly. But in February 2013, we were launched. In February 2014, the first FIDO implementation was done. Right, it's driven by Samsung and Knock Knock, who brought the early Galaxy handset, the fingerprint sensor, to PayPal. And say, hey, look at this. You can now use this Galaxy phone to allow your users to sign into apps. And PayPal, to their credit, said, yeah, that's super interesting, but I want to see you standardize this, right? I want multiple options from multiple vendors. And so they went back and formed Fido Alliance, and that's how Fido came to be. So it was formed in February 2013, the first implementation in February 2014. Our first protocols came out later that year. The first FIDO Certified program was launched in May of 2015. I should note that since then we've had close to 1,000 products, B2B products, be FIDO certified. So it's really been a wildly successful program. September 2015, NTT Docomo became the first mobile operator to deploy FIDO at scale. And then in February 2016, a very significant milestone for FIDO, in that we were working on what we called our FIDO 2.0 web APIs, and we decided to contribute those to W3C, and that formed the WebAuthn working group. So when you hear about WebAuthn, that stems from this. And that led to FIDO 2. So FIDO 2 is the FIDO standard that includes WebAuthn and an iteration of UTF called CTAP. And moving forward, beyond that, FIDO 2 set the stage for even more good things to happen. Starting in 2019, we had Android and Windows become FIDO certified platforms. In January 2020, Apple joined FIDO Alliance. And those are also very significant because if you think about the challenge FIDO Alliance has, right, we're trying to replace passwords. That's a very big goal. And OTPs, likewise, a very big goal. Those two technologies have the advantage of incumbents, meaning that everyone already uses them and they're there. And they have the advantage of ubiquity, meaning that you can use these technologies anywhere. So by having FIDO 2 standardized in all these devices, all of a sudden FIDO now is literally in the fingertips of most users on the planet. So that sets the stage for us to do more and more to accelerate more and more adoption. So moving forward to these milestones, in April 21, released our first IoT spec. In March of 2022, of course, we announced Passkey, and then this past October, we announced the release of the DocAuth certification program. And those are just some highlights over the past 10 years. So I guess the question is, so what's next for FIDO Alliance? Well, simply put, more of the same, right? We'll continue to focus on driving innovation, industry coalescence, and adoption on FIDO authentication by building technology, iterating on the technology, supporting a very vibrant ecosystem, and then doing whatever we can to help facilitate adoption and make sure that those of you who choose to deploy FIDO can indeed be successful with your goals. So just to wrap up my part of the session today, a couple of things to think about. First of all, if you're considering deploying FIDO, do so today. All right, so even if you want to deploy Passkey once they're live on all platforms, you don't need to wait for that. Get yourself a FIDO foundation using FIDO 2 or even a UAF app. Get yourself aware of how FIDO works and start deploying today so that you're fully equipped to leverage the new innovations down the road. Build upon 10 years of progress. 10 years is a significant amount of time, but it also shows exactly how much intellectual property has been poured into these protocols. Right, so many of the people talking to you today are FIDO contributors, and they're brilliant people. Right, so we have 10 years of some of the brightest minds on the planet who have poured their hearts into these specifications that are free for you to use. So leverage that, please do. Also leverage FIDO best practices, right? We want you to be successful. We have guidance, we have tips, we have UX guidelines, deployment guidelines, leverage those. Then last but not least, get engaged. Well, you're engaged by being here today. If you're not taking part in the FIDO Korea working group, or if you're not a member, I'd encourage you to do so and look to get updates from us on other events and other fora that you can take part in to take part in the FIDO community. So that's all I have, so thank you so much. Again, thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to be here, and I'll look forward to the rest of today's agenda. Thank you.